The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. 12 ancient species sat at the great table of power. They had mapped every corner of the Milky Way. They had built stations that floated between galaxies. They had learned secrets of the universe that younger races could not even imagine. And in all their long history, they had never once felt afraid. The HFY were beings made of living crystal. They could live for 10,000 years, and their memories never faded. The Sorrel Collective was a hive mind of billions of creatures thinking as one. The Dromori sailed through space in ships that were actually alive, grown from seeds planted in the hearts of dying stars. These were the elder species. These were the masters of the galaxy. So when humans first arrived at the Concord's great station 200 years ago, the reaction was not fear. It was amusement. High Arbiter Velthonis still remembered that day. He had been young then, only 800 years old. He had watched from the observation deck as the human ship approached. It was small and ugly, made of metal that burned fuel to move. The elder species had stopped using such primitive technology millions of years ago. The human ambassadors had walked into the great hall with their heads held high. They were strange creatures. Soft skin, weak bodies. They lived for less than 100 years, which seemed like a cruel joke. How could any species accomplish anything in such a short time? The Concord delegates had listened politely to their request for membership. Some had struggled not to laugh. The Sorrel Hive speaker had leaned close to Velthonis and clicked its mandibles. Look at them. They're like children playing at being adults. Give them their small piece of space and let them feel important. And that is exactly what the Concord did. They gave humanity a forgotten corridor of space between two dead nebulae. It was worthless territory that no one wanted. The humans had accepted it gratefully and returned home. Within a decade, the Concord had mostly forgotten they existed. That was 200 years ago. Now Velthonis was no longer young. He had risen to become High Arbiter of the Dromori, one of the most powerful positions in the galaxy. And for the first time in his very long life, he felt something cold crawling up his spine. It had started with small things. Trade routes that once passed through human space had been quietly changed. Cargo captains refused to fly near the human border. When Velthonis asked why, they could not give clear answers. They just shook their heads and said it felt wrong. Then came the reports. 17 exploration ships from various species had entered human space in the last 10 years. They had been sent to map the region, to check on humanity's development, to establish trade relations. Standard missions that happened all the time. None of them had returned. Velthonis had brought this to the Council's attention. He had stood before the great table and presented his evidence. He had asked for an investigation. The response was exactly what he had expected. "You worry about nothing," said the HFY representative, her crystal body chiming with each word. "Humans are primitive. They probably cannot even detect ships in their territory. The vessels likely suffered mechanical failures." 17 ships? Velthonis asked. From 7 different species? All suffering failures in the same region? The Sorrel Hive speaker waved a claw dismissively. "The corridor we gave them is full of unstable stars and radiation fields. We gave them that space because it was dangerous. This is not surprising. Then why have the humans thrived there?" Velthonis pressed. "Our long-range sensors show they have colonized over 40 worlds. Their population has grown to nearly 100 billion. How does a primitive species do that in dangerous space?" This caused a moment of silence. But only a moment. "They breed quickly," someone said, and laughter filled the hall. "That is what short-lived species do. They make more of themselves before they die." Velthonis did not laugh. He looked around the table at the elder species who had ruled the galaxy for so long. They were powerful beyond imagination. They had technology that could destroy stars. They had knowledge accumulated over millions of years. But they had one great weakness. They had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. Velthonus tried one more time. The humans stopped sending ambassadors 40 years ago. They stopped responding to communications entirely. Their borders have gone dark. Does this not concern anyone? The HFY representative, a massive reptilian warrior, slammed his fist on the table. It concerns me. It concerns me that we waste time talking about insects when there are real matters to discuss. If the humans want to hide in their little corner of space, let them. They are nothing. The matter was closed. The council moved on to other business, but Velthonus could not move on. In the weeks that followed, he used his authority to gather more information. He spoke with traders who worked near human space. He reviewed ancient records of humanity's first arrival. He studied everything the Concord knew about Earth and its people. What he found disturbed him deeply. Earth was not a gentle world. It was a planet of extremes. Burning deserts and frozen wastelands. Violent storms and shaking ground. The creatures that evolved there had to fight for every breath. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had nearly destroyed themselves many times. And yet, they had crawled out of the mud and reached for the stars. The Concord had looked at humanity and seen weakness. But Velthonus was beginning to see something else. He was beginning to see a species that had been tested by fire since the moment it was born. And now that species had gone, silent, late one night. Velthonus stood alone in his chamber and stared at a map of the galaxy. The human corridor was marked in gray, a tiny strip of nothing surrounded by the vast territories of the elder species. But as he looked at it, the gray seemed to grow darker. It seemed to spread dawn in the distance. He could hear the council members laughing at some joke. They were always laughing. They had laughed for 3,000 years. Velthonus wondered if they would still be laughing when they finally learned what was growing in the dark. The HFY Dominion had conquered 60 star systems. They were warriors born and raised for battle. Their scales could stop bullets. Their claws could tear through metal. From the moment they hatched, they would train to fight, to conquer, to never show weakness. In 10,000 years of war, they had never lost a single campaign. Supreme Commander Zothrak stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the stars ahead. Beyond those stars lay human space. He had studied the reports about the missing ships. He had heard the whispers of fear from the weaker species. And he had laughed at all of it. Humans were soft creatures. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. They lived for less than 100 years and spent most of that time sick or sleeping. The idea that such pathetic beings could threaten the HFY was an insult, but Zothrak was not stupid. He knew that the missing ships were a mystery, so he would not send a small expedition. He would send the 7th Conquest Fleet, 400 warships assembled at the border of human space. 2 million HFY soldiers stood ready for battle. The fleet carried enough weapons to crack a planet in half. Whatever secrets the humans were hiding, Zothrak would tear them out by force. "Begin the invasion," he commanded. The fleet crossed the border in perfect formation. Sensors scanned in every direction. Weapons were charged and ready. Every soldier was alert. They moved deeper into human space, waiting for resistance. Nothing came. They passed the first human colony world. It floated in space like a blue and green jewel, covered in cities and farms. Millions of humans lived there, but no defense fleet rose to meet the invaders. No weapons fired. No alarm sounded. Zothrak felt the first small doubt enter his mind. This was wrong. No species simply allowed invaders into their territory. Even the weakest creatures would fight to protect their homes. Why were the humans doing nothing? Continue forward, he ordered. They are probably too afraid to fight. The fleet moved deeper. They passed a second colony, then a third. Each world was full of life, full of humans going about their daily business. And each world ignored the massive invasion fleet passing overhead. One of Zothrak's officers spoke up. "Commander, this feels like a trap." "There is no trap," Zothrak growled. "They are simply cowards. We will reach their homeworld and burn it to ash. Then they will learn to fear us." But even as he said the words, Zothrak felt cold. The human colonies were strange. The buildings were too tall, too complex. The technology visible on the surface was far more advanced than the Concorde's records suggested. These were not the primitive beings the galaxy remembered. 6 hours after crossing the border, the fleet reached a large empty area of space. There were no planets here, no stations, nothing but void. Zothrak ordered a stop to recalculate their course. That is when the lights went out. Every ship in the fleet lost power at the same moment. 400 warships went dark. Engines died. Weapons went cold. Life support systems flickered and failed. 2 million soldiers found themselves floating in complete blackness. Zothrak tried to shout orders, but his voice would not come. His body would not move. He could only stand frozen on his bridge as something reached into his mind, thought it was not painful. It was worse than pain. Images flooded his consciousness. He saw a world of fire and ice. He saw creatures fighting for survival against impossible odds. He saw wars that lasted centuries. He saw plagues that killed billions. He saw nuclear fire consuming cities. He saw children starving in streets. He saw violence and suffering beyond anything he had ever imagined. And through it all, he saw the humans. He saw them endure. He saw them refuse to die. He saw them claw their way through every horror their universe threw at them. He saw the rage in their eyes. He saw what they had become. The Kethvari were warriors. They thought they understood violence. They thought they understood strength. They understood nothing. Zothrak's heart stopped. It simply stopped beating, overwhelmed by what it had witnessed. Across the fleet, 2 million hearts did the same. In perfect silence, in perfect darkness, the greatest military force the Kethvari had ever assembled died without firing a single shot. 3 days later, a single transmission reached the Kethvari Dominion. It came from human space, from coordinates deep within the Forbidden's territory. The message was in perfect Kethvari language, spoken with no emotion at all. "Come collect what remains." The recovery fleet found the 7th Conquest Fleet arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. Every ship was intact. Every weapon was unfired. There was no damage of any kind. It looked like the fleet had simply stopped, arranged itself into a strange shape, and waited to be found. Inside the ships, 2 million Kethvari soldiers sat at their posts. Their eyes were open. Their faces were frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Medical teams examined the bodies and found nothing wrong. No wounds, no poison, no signs of any weapon. The autopsies revealed only one thing. Every heart had stopped at exactly the same moment, as if someone had reached across the void and turned them off like machines. The Kethvari Dominion had never retreated from anything. They had fought wars against species 10 times their size. They had invaded worlds protected by technology far beyond their own. They had always found a way to win, but there was nothing to fight here. There was nothing to understand. There was only the cold truth that something in human space could kill 2 million warriors with a thought, for the first time in 10,000 years. The Kethvari ran. When news reached the Galactic Concorde, the laughter finally stopped. High Arbiter Velthonis stood before the council and watched the faces of the elder species. He saw the Sorrel Hive speaker trembling. He saw the Vethkai representative's crystal body cracking with stress. He saw fear spreading like a disease. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I told you something was wrong." No one argued with him this time. No one made jokes about primitive humans. They just stared at the images of the dead fleet, at the bodies frozen in terror, and wondered what they had been so foolish to ignore. The humans had not just killed an army. They had sent a message, and the galaxy was finally listening. Fear spread through the galaxy like poison in water. The news of the Kethvari defeat could not be hidden. 2 million warriors dead without a single battle. An entire fleet destroyed by an enemy that never showed itself. The story passed from station to station, from world to world, growing darker with each telling. The Galactic Concord called emergency sessions. For the first time in centuries, all 12 elder species sent their highest leaders. They gathered in the Great Hall and argued for days. Some wanted to send a combined fleet to destroy human space entirely. Others wanted to negotiate. A few suggested simply pretending nothing had happened, but no one could agree on what the humans actually were. High Arbiter Velthonus watched the chaos with tired eyes. He had tried to warn them for years. Now they were finally afraid, but fear without understanding was useless. They needed answers. They needed to know what humanity had become. The Vethkai offered the first piece of the puzzle. 20 years ago, they had sent a deep space probe to survey the far edges of the galaxy. The probe had passed near human territory and then vanished. Everyone assumed it was destroyed. They were wrong. Recovery teams found the probe drifting in dead space, just outside the human border. Its crystalline memory cores were damaged but not destroyed. The Vethkai scientists worked for weeks to recover the data. What they found made several of them request immediate leave from duty. The probe had recorded images from inside human space. The pictures were corrupted and broken, but some details were clear. There were structures in the void between stars. Massive things that seemed to twist and bend in ways that made no sense. Ships that moved without engines, without any visible means of motion. They simply existed in one place and then existed in another. But the worst images were the ones the scientists could not explain. Dark shapes that the probe sensors could not properly see. Things that existed at the edge of vision, always moving, always watching. The data analysts who studied these images reported nightmares for months afterward. 2 of them never returned to work. The probe was not attacked. The lead Vethkai scientist reported to the council. It was allowed to see these things. The humans wanted us to find this data. More evidence arrived in the following weeks. Refugees began appearing at Concord stations. They were not humans. They were members of minor species whose territories bordered human space. Small civilizations that the elder species had never paid attention to. Now they were running. A Morvathi trader was brought before the council to share what he knew. The Morvathi were a peaceful species of merchants who had lived near the human border for generations. They had traded with humans in the early days, before the silence began. The trader was old, his fur gray and thin, and his hands shook as he spoke. "We called it the silence," he said. "That is how it always started. The communications would stop. The ships would stop coming. And then there would be nothing. Just quiet." He explained that the Morvathi had watched human expansion for decades. The humans did not conquer like other species. They did not send armies or fleets. They simply waited. Colonies near the human border would go quiet one by one. No violence. No destruction. Just silence. Then the humans would come, the trader whispered. They would arrive at the empty worlds and claim them. But the worlds were not damaged. The buildings still stood. The food was still fresh on the tables. It was as if everyone had simply stopped. The council demanded to know what happened to the missing people. The trader shook his head. No one knows. No one has ever found them. They are just gone. Millions of beings vanished without a trace. He looked up at the elder species with hollow eyes. The humans do not need to invade. They just wait. And then everyone disappears. The Sorrel Collective refused to believe such stories. They were a hive mind, billions of creatures linked together into a single vast consciousness. They believed that no force could affect them all at once. Their mental unity made them immune to fear, to doubt, to psychological attack. They decided to prove this by sending an envoy to the humans. The Sorrel assembled their most powerful diplomatic team. 300 minds were linked together, forming a consciousness greater than any single being. This combined intellect would enter human space, make contact with humanity, and learn the truth. No primitive species could threaten such a vast collective intelligence. The envoy crossed the border on a bright morning. Their ship was the finest the Sorrel had ever built, filled with technology meant to protect them from any attack. They sent regular reports as they traveled deeper into human territory. The reports described empty space, quiet worlds, no sign of threat. Then, exactly 20 minutes after crossing a certain point, all 300 minds screamed. The scream lasted only a second. Then the link shattered. 300 Sorrel, who had been one consciousness, were suddenly alone in their own heads. The shock was so severe that most of them collapsed immediately. Their ship drifted, powerless, as its crew lay twitching on the floor. Rescue teams found them 3 days later. The Sorrel were alive but broken. They could not speak normally. They could not link with other minds. They just sat in their beds and repeated the same words over and over, each one saying exactly the same thing. They showed us what they remember. They remember everything. They remember Earth. The doctors tried to learn more. They asked what the humans had shown them. They asked what it meant. But the survivors could not explain. When they tried, they began screaming again. Only one of the 300 ever recovered enough to speak clearly. She was brought before the council, thin and pale, her compound eyes empty of life. When they asked what she had seen, she was silent for a long time. "You think humans are young," she finally said. "You think they are children because they have only existed for a short time. But you are wrong. They are old, older than any of us." She looked around the hall at the elder species, the masters of the galaxy. They carry their entire history inside them. Every war, every plague, every death, every moment of suffering their species has ever experienced. They remember it all, always, every one of them. Her voice cracked, and they showed us. They made us remember it too. She began to cry, a broken sound that echoed through the silent hall. How do they survive it? How do they carry so much pain and still exist? She buried her face in her hands. What kind of monsters has the universe made? No one in the council had an answer. They just sat in horrified silence and wondered what else they did not know. The whispers were growing louder, and somewhere in the darkness, humanity was watching. High Arbiter Velthonus made his decision alone. The council was paralyzed by fear. The elder species were arguing endlessly about what to do. Some wanted to attack human space with every weapon they had. Others wanted to build walls around the human territory and pretend it did not exist. None of them had the courage to seek the truth, but Velthonus needed to understand. He had spent his entire life studying the galaxy, learning its secrets, serving the Concord. He could not spend his remaining years in ignorance. He would go to the humans himself, alone and unarmed, and he would ask them directly, what had humanity become? His ship was small and carried no weapons. He recorded a message for the council, explaining what he was doing and why. He expected them to try to stop him. But when he launched from the station and turned toward human space, no one followed. Perhaps they were glad to see him go. Perhaps they hoped he would bring back answers. Or perhaps they simply did not care anymore. The journey took 12 days. Velthonis crossed the border that had killed so many others and waited for death. It did not come. He traveled deeper into human territory, passing colony worlds and stations that gleamed with strange technology. His sensors showed him things he could not understand. Ships that seemed to fold space around them. Structures built in dimensions that should not exist. Energy signatures that matched nothing in any database. The humans had not spent their centuries of isolation sitting still. They had changed. They had evolved. They had become something new. On the 15th day, his ship stopped. Not because of any malfunction, but because something took control of it. The engines shut down. The navigation systems locked. A new course appeared on his screen, leading to coordinates in the heart of human space. Velthonis did not resist. He had come to find the humans. Now they were bringing him to them. The station appeared out of the darkness like a dream. It was vast beyond imagination, larger than any structure Velthonis had ever seen. It did not orbit a planet or a star. It simply hung in empty space, glowing with soft light. Its shape was beautiful and terrible, curves and angles that seemed to shift when he looked at them. His ship docked without his input. The airlock opened, and for the first time in 40 years, an outsider walked into human territory. They were waiting for him. Velthonis had expected monsters. After everything he had heard, after the destroyed fleets and the broken mines, he had imagined that humanity must have transformed into something horrific. But the beings who greeted him looked almost exactly as they had 200 years ago. They were still soft, still fragile, still short-lived. A human standing before him would be dead of old age before Velthonis finished his breakfast. By every measure the galaxy used, they were weak, but their eyes had changed. Velthonis had lived for 1,200 years. He had met beings from every corner of the galaxy. He had spoken with consciousnesses older than stars. And he had never, in all his long life, seen eyes like these. They were deep. So deep that looking into them felt like falling. There was wisdom there, and pain, and something else. Something vast and patient and utterly unafraid. A woman stepped forward. She was neither young nor old by human standards, with dark hair and skin the color of copper. She smiled at him, and the smile held no threat. "Welcome, High Arbiter," she said. "I am called the Rememberer. We have been expecting you." Velthonis found his voice. "You knew I would come?" "We knew someone would. The brave one, or the foolish one. Sometimes they are the same." She gestured for him to follow. "Come, you have questions. We have answers." She led him through corridors of light and shadow. Other humans watched them pass, nodding respectfully. None of them spoke. None of them seemed surprised to see an alien in their midst. They entered a chamber at the heart of the station. It was empty, except for 2 chairs facing each other. The Rememberer sat in one and pointed to the other. "Sit, High Arbiter. This may take some time." Velthonis sat. "What happened to you? What have you become?" "We became what we always were," she said simply. "We just stopped hiding it." She explained it slowly, carefully, as if teaching a child. The galaxy had looked at humanity and seen weakness. Short lives, fragile bodies, primitive technology. They had laughed and given humans a worthless corner of space and forgotten about them, but they had missed the truth. "You elder species evolved on gentle worlds," the Rememberer said. "Your planets were kind. Your paths to intelligence were smooth. You grew powerful because nothing challenged you." She leaned forward. Earth was not gentle. Earth was a monster. Velthonis listened as she described humanity's homeworld. A planet of fire and ice, of earthquakes and volcanoes, of predators that hunted humans for 1,000,000 years, diseases that killed half the population, ice ages that nearly froze them to extinction. And through it all, humans had fought. They had struggled. They had refused to die. "You see our short lives as weakness," the Rememberer said. "But short lives mean fast generations, fast adaptation. We evolved to survive anything because anything was exactly what we faced." She told him about human history. Wars that lasted centuries. Plagues that swept across continents. Famines that starved millions. Weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash. Humans had done terrible things to each other and to their world. They had come within moments of total destruction more times than anyone could count. And still they survived. "Every trauma is written into us," the Rememberer said. "Every near extinction. Every horror. We carry it all, High Arbiter. Not in books or databases, but in our very cells. We remember everything because we cannot afford to forget." Belthonis began to understand. The Cathvari fleet. The Soral envoy. You did not attack them. We showed them our memories. We let them feel what we feel every moment of every day. The Rememberer's eyes were sad. They could not bear it. Their minds broke under the weight of what we carry. "But you survive it? How?" She smiled, and for the first time, Belthonis saw the steel beneath her gentle surface. "Because we have no choice. This is what we are. This is what Earth made us. You asked what we have become, High Arbiter." She stood and spread her arms. "We have become what the universe needed us to be. We have become the ones who remember." She told him the final truth then. The reason humanity had gone silent. The reason they had hidden themselves away and grown strong in the darkness. "The universe is not empty," she said. "There are things in the void between galaxies. Old things. Hungry things. They have noticed the light of your civilizations, and they are coming." Belthonis felt cold. "What things?" "You would not understand if I told you. The elder species have never faced true darkness. You have never known real fear." She looked at him with those deep, ancient eyes. "But we have. We were born in fear. We grew strong in fear. And now we stand between you and the darkness." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go back to your council, High Arbiter. Tell them to stay away from our space. Not because we will harm them, but because we are doing what needs to be done. We are standing guard. We are remembering. And when the darkness comes, we will be ready." Belthonis left the station in silence. He had come seeking answers, and he had found them. But he was not sure the galaxy was ready to hear what he had learned. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had never been weak. They were simply waiting for the right moment to show their strength. High Arbiter Belthonis returned to the Galactic Concord, a changed being. His ship crossed back into civilized space after 30 days in the human territory. When he docked at the great station, every eye turned to him. The council had already assembled, waiting for news, waiting for answers, waiting to hear what had happened to the brave fool who had walked into the darkness alone. He stood before them in the great hall. The 12 elder species, the masters of the galaxy, looked down at him from their high seats. They expected a report. They expected data and analysis. They expected the calm, measured words of a diplomat. Instead, Belthonis stood in silence for a long time. "I met them," he finally said. "I spoke with them. I learned what they have become." The Soral Hive speaker leaned forward, mandibles clicking nervously. "Then tell us, what are they? What weapon do they use? How do we defend against them?" Belthonis shook his head slowly. "You do not understand. They are not our enemy. They were never our enemy." He told them what the Rememberer had shared. He described Earth and its horrors. He explained how humanity had been forged in endless struggle, how every trauma was written into their very being, how they carried the weight of their entire history in their minds. He spoke of the things in the void, the darkness coming from between the galaxies, the threat that the elder species had never even imagined. When he finished, the hall was silent. The HFY representative spoke first, her crystal voice trembling. "You are saying they are protectors? That they kill our people to protect us?" "They do not kill," Valthonis said. "They show the truth. Their minds are so full of memory, so weighted with suffering, the contact with them is overwhelming. The Kethvari fleet, the Soral envoy, they could not bear to see what humans see every day." He paused. "We are the weak ones. We cannot survive what they survive." Arguments erupted across the hall. Some called Valthonis a liar. Some demanded proof. The Kethvari representative roared that his people had never been weak, that they would return to human space with an even larger fleet and burn every human world to ash. But Valthonis just watched them with tired eyes. He had seen the truth. He knew what was coming. And he knew that all the anger and pride of the elder species meant nothing against the darkness in the void. "I have one more thing to tell you," he said, and something in his voice made them fall silent. "When I left human space, the Rememberer gave me a warning. She said the darkness has noticed us. It is moving closer every year. Our lights, our civilizations, our noise across the stars. All of it has drawn attention." He looked around the hall at the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "She said that when it comes, when the darkness finally reaches us, we will not be able to fight it. We do not have the strength. We do not have the will. We have been too comfortable for too long." His voice dropped. "But the humans can fight it. The humans were built to fight it. That is why they went silent. That is why they have been preparing. That is why they need us to stay away." The council debated for 3 days. Some still wanted war. Some wanted to pretend none of this was real. But in the end, fear won. The destruction of the Kethvari fleet could not be ignored. The broken minds of the Soral envoy could not be explained away. Something terrible lived in human space, and whether it was humanity itself or something they protected against, the elder species wanted nothing to do with it. The Treaty of Absolute Exclusion was ratified on the 4th day. Human space was declared a forbidden zone. Not to contain humanity, the treaty stated, but to protect the rest of the galaxy from what the humans knew. All trade routes were permanently rerouted. All maps were redrawn. A simple warning was transmitted to every ship, station, and colony in the Milky Way. No species may cross human space. By order of the Galactic Concord. Do not ask why. And so the galaxy moved on. Centuries passed. New generations were born, who had never known a time before the exclusion. The story of humanity became a legend, then a myth, then barely a memory. The elder species continued their endless games of politics and trade. New civilizations rose and fell. Life went on as it always had, but on the edges of the Forbidden Zone, strange things sometimes happened. A cargo ship passing too close to the border would report lights in the darkness. A deep space telescope would catch glimpses of vast structures moving through the void. Travelers would speak of dreams that came when they slept near human space. Dreams of fire and ice and endless struggle. And sometimes, on the darkest edges of the galaxy, something would stir. It happened 3 centuries after the treaty was signed. A HFY observation post at the rim of known space detected something impossible. A tear in the fabric of reality. A hole opening in the darkness between galaxies. And through that hole, something was pushing. The observers could not describe what they saw. Their crystalline minds could not process it. They only knew that it was vast, it was hungry, and it was coming. Panic spread through the Concord. Emergency sessions were called. Fleets were mobilized. But everyone knew, deep in their hearts, that there was nothing they could do. The elder species had no weapons that could fight what was coming. They had no shields that could stop it. Then the darkness retreated. One moment it was there, pressing against reality, reaching hungry tendrils toward the light of civilization. The next moment it was gone. The tier closed. The void fell silent. The observation post recorded one final thing before the darkness fled. A flash of light from deep within the forbidden zone. A burst of energy so powerful it made stars look dim. And then, carried across the void on frequencies no elder species could fully understand. A sound dot. It might have been a battle cry. It might have been a word of power. It might have been nothing more than static dot, but to the observers, it sounded like a scream of rage. The defiant roar of a species that had faced extinction 1,000 times and refused to die. The war cry of Earth's children, finally unleashed against the enemy they had been waiting for. The darkness did not return for a very long time. The elder species never learned exactly what happened in those moments. They never knew what weapons humanity used or what price they paid. They only knew that the threat was gone and that somewhere in the heart of the Forbidden Zone, humanity still stood watch. High Arbiter Valthonis was long dead by then, but his final writings were preserved in the Dromori archives. In them, he described his meeting with the Rememberer and everything she had told him, but he ended with words of his own. "We laughed at them," he wrote. "We looked at their soft bodies and short lives and saw nothing worth respecting. We gave them the worst space we had and forgot they existed. We were fools, the greatest fools the galaxy has ever known. Because while we sat comfortable in our ancient empires, humanity was preparing. They were growing strong in the darkness. They were remembering every horror they had ever faced so that they could face the horrors yet to come. And now, because of them, we are safe. We will never know what they fight. We will never see the battles they win. We will only know that the darkness retreats and that humanity stands between us and the void." They asked for nothing in return. They only asked to be left alone to do what needed to be done. So leave them alone. Let them remember for us. Let them carry the weight we cannot carry. And be grateful every day of your long and comfortable lives that Earth made them what they are. The warning still broadcast to this day. No species may cross human space. And in the silence of the Forbidden Zone, humanity remembers, humanity watches, and humanity waits. The galaxy sleeps safely because Earth's children never do.